Good morning, everyone. How are you this morning? It's Megan from Hillcrest joining you for story time. I'll be reading two different books today, and if you have them at home, great. Go ahead and grab them and we'll read them together. We have Piggy Takes a Dare, and then we're going to be reading a classic tale from Beatrix Potter, The Tale of Tom Kitten. Right, let's go ahead and start with Piggy Takes a Dare. Emily, Rose, and Melissa were the prettiest, most popular, and neatest girls in school. Or at least Piggy thought so. Emily, Rose, and Melissa all had the best outfits. Sometimes they came to school wearing the same color. Sometimes they all wore the same hairstyle. And they always sat together at lunch. They liked to sit by themselves and talk about the other kids. Melissa lived next door to Piggy. Every day, Rosie and Melissa went over to Emily's house after school. Piggy wished she could go too, but they never asked her. Once in a while, they let Piggy walk home with them, but they didn't talk to her. They just talked to each other. "What are you all wearing tomorrow?" Piggy asked once. "Maybe I could wear the same thing." "Oh, you probably wouldn't have anything that would be right," said Emily with a yawn. "Why do you want to be friends with them?" Skeeter asked Piggy one day at lunch. "They're so mean." "They're not mean," said Piggy. "They're cool." "Yeah," said Janice, "as cool as 3 ice cubes." But Piggy wasn't listening. That very day, she decided to do something brave. She walked right over to Emily. There we are, back on. "I don't know," said Rosie slowly. "Do you think she can be in our group?" "I don't know," said Melissa. "Her clothes are kind of hopeless." "Well," said Emily at last, "maybe, if she can do all the right things." Piggy was very happy. She was going to be in the cool group. She would sit next to them at lunch and everything. "What do I have to do?" she said eagerly. "First of all," said Emily, "you have to get some new clothes. We don't like yours." Piggy gulped. She'd have to ask her mother. "Second of all," said Emily, "we will, of course, need to copy your homework every night." I don't know if these seem like very nice girls. Let's see. This didn't feel good to Piggy, but she really wanted to be friends with the coolest girls in school. So that night, when she was all done with her homework, she took it over to Emily's house. "Not bad," said Emily. "We can use it." The next day, Melissa said to Piggy, "We don't like your hair." "You don't?" said Piggy. "We don't," said Rosie. "We think you should dye it red." Piggy gasped. "Red? Dye it red? I don't know. I don't know how it will look." Emily's eyes narrowed, and she looked straight at Piggy. "We dare you to do it." The next morning, Piggy slipped into her seat as the bell was ringing. She wore a kerchief on her head. "Piggy, what happened to your hair?" Skeeter whispered to her. Piggy blushed as red as her hair. "It was supposed to be really light," she whispered. "It was supposed to wash right out. I look so awful, and my mom is really mad." Emily looked at her from across the room and grinned. At lunch, Emily, Rosie, and Melissa let Piggy sit with them. All her old friends were looking at her and shaking their heads, but Piggy was at last sitting with the prettiest, coolest girls at school. That night, she went home and washed her hair 6 times until all the red was almost gone. Piggy, you see, Piggy, said Emily on the way to school the next day, we've been thinking. We want you to be our friend, but you'll have to do one more thing. What is it? Piggy asked with dread. Oh, don't even ask her, Emily. She won't do it, said Rosie. She's probably too chicken, said Melissa. Piggy had sort of a cold feeling in her stomach. It was a bad feeling. What is it? She said again. Well, said Emily slowly, you know Mrs. Pritchett, who lives in that ugly old house at the end of the Oak Street? Kind of, said Piggy. She knew which house it was anyway. It was way at the end of a dead-end street. The gate flapped in the wind, and the paint was peeling off. Well, Mrs. Pritchett yelled at Rosie just for breaking her window with a rock by accident. We hate her. She's a witch, and her house is haunted. So what do I have to do? Piggy asked nervously. You have to go up to her house and paint Mrs. Pritchett is a witch on her front door, said Emily. It's what she deserves. Piggy trudged home from school that day, feeling a whole mess of tangled up feelings. She didn't feel good about painting awful words on somebody's door, but she wouldn't get to be with Emily, Rosie, and Melissa if she didn't take the dare. She would just have to do it. Piggy couldn't even eat the cookies her mother had left her in the kitchen. Oh, poor Piggy. The next day, it was time to do it. Piggy rummaged around in her closet and had the art supplies and finally came out with a little jar of red paint and the smallest brush she could find. After all, Emily hadn't said how big the words had to be. She tucked the paint and brush into her pocket. Piggy walked toward Oak Street, praying that she wouldn't run into Skeeter. She didn't want Skeeter to ask her what she was doing. At last, she was there. The house was even scarier than she remembered. What if Mrs. Pritchett really was a witch? She thought about going home and forgetting the whole thing. But then she remembered Emily's dare. She couldn't back out now. She took a deep breath and marched toward the house. Piggy opened the creaky gate and tiptoed up the walk. The front yard was full of weeds and tall grass. Now all she had to do was get up the front stairs quietly, and she'd be at the door. Her heart was pounding. She stepped on the bottom step and onto the bottom step and then the second one. At least the steps didn't make any noise. Ah! Suddenly there was a splintering crash. The wooden step gave way under Piggy and her foot went right through. Piggy let out a scream as she felt her leg shoot downward. She was stuck. Before Piggy could get herself unstuck, the front door opened. Standing in the doorway was Mrs. Pritchett. Oh, my stars, she gasped. Let me help you out of there. Piggy's eyes filled with tears. Her leg hurt. And what if Mrs. Pritchett really was a witch? Maybe she was just pretending to be nice. And when she got Piggy in her clutches, it was too awful to think about. Mrs. Pritchett came rushing down the stairs and gently helped Piggy free her leg. I knew I should have gotten that step fixed, she said to herself, more than Piggy. I knew it. No, it's my fault, said Piggy. No, no, dear, said Mrs. Pritchett, blowing her enormous nose in her handkerchief. Of course it's not your fault. It's just that everything needs fixing, and I'm all alone here. Piggy looked down at her leg. It wasn't bad, just scraped and scratched. Oh, you must come in, dear. I'll call your mother, said Mrs. Pritchett. She helped Piggy into the house, which was rather dark inside, but had nice old furniture. Please don't call my mother, said Piggy. I'm really okay. I don't want her to worry her. How would she explain to her mother why she'd been on Mrs. Pritchett's steps to begin with? Mrs. Pritchett sat Piggy down in her living room and went into the kitchen, and came bustling back with soap and water and clean bandages. She also had a little tray with some cookies and a cup of wonderful smelling tea. "It's raspberry tea," she said. "It makes you feel much better." In a little while, Piggy's leg was clean and bandaged. She had drunk all her tea. By the way, why were you coming to see me anyhow? Piggy didn't know what to say. I made a mistake," she said quietly at last. "Yes, I suppose you wanted the house right next door," Mrs. Pritchett said. "There's some children there, I think. Please stop by another time, though. Now go and find your friends." Mrs. Piggy thanked Mrs. Pritchett. When she got to the front gate, she waved at the old lady. On the way home, she thought, "Yes, I will go and find my friends, my real friends." Piggy was happy to find Skeeter at home doing homework with Janice. They smiled when they saw her. "Thought you had new friends now," said Skeeter. "No way," said Piggy. She plopped down in the chair. "Skeeter, did you ever take a dare?" "Uh-uh," said Skeeter. "Taking dares is dumb. I do what I want to do, not what somebody else dares me to do." "I took a dare once," said Janice. "My big brother dared me to eat some pepper. Boy, was I sorry. I'm never taking a dare again." "You know what?" said Piggy. "Tomorrow at school, I'm going to tell Emily, Rosie, and Melissa that they can just keep their friendship. They're bad friends." "That's a good idea," said Skeeter. "I think you should do it. In fact, I dare you to do it." And then she laughed and ducked the pillow that Piggy had thrown at her. The end. What did you think about Piggy Takes a Dare? Would you take a dare? Ooh, I don't know. All right, let's move on and read The Tale of Tom Kitten. There's the cover. The Tale of Tom Kitten. Once upon a time, there were 3 little kittens, and their names were Mittens, Tom Kitten, and Moppet. They had dear little fur coats of their own, and they tumbled about the doorstep and played in the dust. But one day, their mother, Mrs. Tabitha Twitchett, expected friends to tea, so she fetched the kittens indoors to wash and dress them before the fine company arrived. First, she scrubbed their faces. This one is Moppet. And then she brushed their fur. This one is Mittens. And then she combed their tails and whiskers. This one is Tom Kitten. He was very naughty, and he scratched. Mrs. Tabitha dressed Moppet and Mittens in clean pinafores and tuckers, and then she took out all sorts of elegant, uncomfortable clothes out of the chest of drawers in order to dress her son, Thomas. Tom Kitten was very fat, and he had grown. Several buttons burst off. His mother sewed them on again. That's a silly-looking kitten. When the 3 kittens were ready, Mrs. Tabitha unwisely turned them out in the garden to be out of the way while she made hot buttered toast. "Now keep your frocks clean, children. You must walk on your hind legs. Keep away from the dirty ash pit and from Sally Henny Penny and the pigsty and the puddle ducks." Look at all those cute kittens. Moppet and Mittens walked down the garden path unsteadily. Presently, they trod up their pinafores and fell on their noses. They stood up, and there were several green smears. "Let us climb on the rockery and sit on the garden wall," said Moppet. They turned their pinafores back to front, and they went up a skip and a jump, and while Moppet's white tucker fell down into the road, Tom Kitten was quite unable to jump